Hello, everyone, and on behalf of our team at Transforming Education, welcome to our latest resource, the first of 6 mini modules introducing our SEL for Educators Toolkit. My name is Lindsey, and I am incredibly proud to share this latest resource with you. Our team at Transforming Education focuses on fully integrating social emotional learning and the whole child approach into the schools and systems across the country. We work with a number of leaders and partner organizations in doing that work, and in doing so have found it critical to address the social emotional development of the adults in school settings, focusing on how we can best support the growth and well-being of educators. And so in this series of 6 mini modules, we'll walk you through and give you a small introduction to the much more robust set of resources you can find in our SEL for Educators Toolkit. So let's dive in. Here you can see we'll be, over the course of the next couple of months, releasing 6 different mini modules, all aligned with our toolkit. This first one will be a brief overview on the what, the why, and the how of social emotional learning for educators. We will then give an introduction to each of the 5 high leverage practices that we have synthesized from a huge wealth of resource, really sort of distilling what those key areas are for educators to focus on when thinking of their own social emotional development and well-being. One thing that we feel it's incredibly important to address is that when we think about adult social emotional development, specifically in school settings, there's 2 equally profound and powerful components to that. One is the individual work of an educator, that intrapersonal examination and exploration to discover and build up their own skill sets. The other is the systems and structures within the environment that support that learning and growth. And it's really those 2 pieces that come together to provide the most effective environment for that growth to happen. And so the focus of our toolkit is on that individual work, what one person can do on their own, ideally in community, but we also want to acknowledge the important role that school leaders play in establishing a strong and supportive environment so that all educators can do that work. So as I said, we're going to briefly in this first module go through the what, the why, and the how of SEL for educators. In future modules, we'll dive deeper into each of those 5 high leverage practices that we break down in the how. So first of all, what? What are we talking about when we talk about educator SEL? There are a number of related terms that are often used in the field when thinking about the social emotional development of educators, or really the social emotional development of adults in general. We might talk about emotional intelligence, well-being, resilience, and self-care. Even though there is tremendous overlap and intersection in these terms, there are some specific components of SEL for educators in school settings that are unique. And one thing I want to point out, a special feature of our toolkit, is if you click on these Learn More buttons throughout the presentation when downloading the toolkit, you can learn more about the research behind some of this information. So thinking about those related terms, we looked at a wealth of information to try to distill down what is it that is unique about educator SEL. And so at Transforming Ed, we have decided that educator SEL is defined as the competencies that adults need in order to manage stress and create a safe and supportive classroom environment. Additionally, it's the skills and mindsets that adults need to effectively embody, teach, model, and coach student SEL. And lastly, the overall well-being and emotional state of adults in school settings. One thing I want to point out here is you notice there's a huge focus intentionally on the educator themselves and their own social emotional learning. But you can also see the connection to the impact on the classroom environment and the student experience, making it unique to an educator and not just any adult. So why is this important? There's been tremendous elevation in the importance of focusing on teachers given our current climate. However, I think it's important to address the social emotional development and well-being of educators is critically important now, but it has also always been important and will continue to be important. We must support the social emotional development and well-being of the adults if we expect them to support the social emotional growth of students. So through a thorough investigation of research, we've distilled down to sort of three big buckets or categories where the evidence supports and validates this focus on educator SEL. Those categories are cultivating strong relationships, modeling social emotional skills, and managing stress and reducing burnout. So let's dig into that first one, strong relationships. We see that educators who embody social emotional skills and mindsets cultivate strong relationships with both colleagues and students. We all know the importance of having strong relationships in order to learn, grow, take risks. And having that foundation of social emotional skills within educators helps to cultivate those relationships. Those strong relationships within a school community contribute to a positive climate for staff and students. Again, we're seeing that the impact is not just on the individual, it's not just on that individual educator and the students, but it's also on the relationships with staff and colleagues, really impacting the overall atmosphere and climate of the school setting. Again, when you download the toolkit, you can click here to learn more about the way in which social emotional learning of educators connects with strong relationships. Now let's think about modeling social emotional skills. So educators who practice social emotional skills are able to more effectively model healthy strategies for their students, including how to navigate stress and frustration. We all know that students can see and hear everything. So it is really the way in which the educator shows up and models their own social emotional skills, their own strategies, that students really learn how to navigate things on their own. And this is of critical importance, as mentioned here, in moments of stress and frustration. Furthermore, teachers who are able to model these healthy social emotional skills contribute again to a safe and pro-social learning environment. So that individual strength of having, being grounded in social emotional skills really permeates the culture to provide a safe and supportive learning environment. And perhaps the most discussed area is the ways in which focusing on social emotional development of educators can support them in managing stress and reducing burnout. So educators who develop their social emotional skills are better able to manage their stress and anxiety, reduce burnout, and are less likely to consider leaving the profession. Reducing staff stress levels improves job satisfaction and retention, ensuring that students experience stability and consistency from year to year. It is incredibly important that the same way we want students to feel happy, healthy, safe, and successful in the school environment, we want that for the staff, for those educators as well. So by reducing the staff stress, adults are more happy and satisfied with their jobs. They're more likely to stay around and stick in this profession that they care so much about. And this also ensures that stability and consistency for students. It's very important that students have strong relationships with trusted adults over a long period of time, and helping to work on those social emotional skills of the educators keeps them in the school buildings where we want them doing their best work. And students whose teachers exhibit the lower levels of stress coming out of that strong social emotional foundation actually achieve higher test scores and exhibit fewer behavior infractions. Again, you can click here to learn more about that relationship between the educator's social emotional sense and the impact it has on students. So let's just take a minute to pause and process. There's a lot of information packed into a small amount of time. So thinking back on what we just discussed, in what context do you see your own social emotional development most directly impacting students? What are those situations in which it is your social emotional development and well-being as an educator that directly impacts student experience? And then considering the reasons we just outlined, cultivating strong relationships, modeling social emotional skills, and managing stress and reducing burnout, which of those would motivate you most to focus on your own social emotional development and well-being? Which of those reasons motivates you to focus in this area, and why that one? So now that we've had a moment to sort of pause, internalize some of that content, let's give just a sneak peek into the how. So we've recognized what educator social emotional learning is, why it's incredibly important to focus on. So now the key question is logically, how are we going to do this work? So we have decided for the purpose of our toolkit that we're really zooming in on what is within an educator's circle of control. So there are many, many things that influence the social emotional development and well-being of an educator in a school setting. And so for this toolkit, we really dug into the areas in which the educator has some control over their own growth and development. We think it's incredibly important to point out that if you are a school leader, your position comes with additional responsibility. We want you engaging in this work for yourself as an individual, but you must also consider the ways in which the systems and structures you're creating encourage or inhibit the social emotional development of adults in your schools. So every member of the community, we encourage to do this work on their own individual level, but then also as leaders, we want you thinking about how you are supporting others in doing just that. So again, based on a wealth of information and extensive research, we've really synthesized the findings and distilled down into these 5 high leverage practices for educator SEL. Examine identity, explore emotions, cultivate compassionate curiosity, orient towards optimism, and establish balance and boundaries. In each of the 5 following mini modules that we will be releasing, we'll dive a bit deeper into the research and the supporting strategies for each of these 5 high leverage practices. In the meantime, if you'd like to learn more, you can download Transform Ed's SEL for Educators Toolkit in its entirety based on this link on the bottom of this page, or by visiting our website. The toolkit contains a number of resources, including the professional learning presentation, which slides from here were pulled from, but you can see in its entirety in that download, a companion guide, which presents engaging interactive activities that you can do either with yourself or with colleagues to further apply this learning. A snapshot, which is a one-pager that summarizes the 5 high leverage practices and their corresponding strategies. And then lastly, an extensive and comprehensive reference list that connects you to all of the resources that we utilize to create this toolkit. We are here for you. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on YouTube. Also follow us on various forms of social media. Again, check out our website for not just this toolkit, but for other downloadable resources as well. As an organization, we feel very strongly about effectively bridging a gap that exists between research and practice, and really creating a bi-directional relationship between research in the field and the amazing practice that is happening out in the field. So we hope this toolkit is just one resource to bridge that between those two areas. And we are excited for you to stay tuned and come back for the next mini modules in our series on SEL for educators. Thank you so much. Have a great day.